Hi, my name is Kern Carter, and we are diving straight in today because we are talking about gatekeeping and gatekeepers. And I say, bring it back, bring them back, bring the gatekeepers back. I'm totally joking. I'm totally joking, but not exactly. And we'll get into why I say I'm not exactly joking in a minute. But I really do want to talk about um, this topic of gatekeeping and what it means today, and what form it has taken on today. And are authors better off now today, or were they better off in the past, where the gatekeepers were actually an obstacle in becoming a published author? So we want to talk about that today. But this topic of bringing back gatekeepers is actually taken from my newsletter, which is called Writers Are Superstars. It's taken from my newsletter. I put it out once every Sunday. I'll leave a link for that at the bottom. But let's just dive into it. Let's dive right into it. So the reason I said bring back gatekeeping is really because I heard something. I heard this. I got the idea from a DJ named Ebro, who is a hip hop DJ, or I should say, like, not a DJ. He's a hip hop like radio host. He has his own Apple Music show and stuff like that, and he's also on a radio station called Hot 97. So I heard him say that this crazy stat. He said that there are over 100,000 songs uploaded every single day to streaming platforms. That is 36 million songs every year. Now, let's suppose I'm like super generous and say that 1 million songs a year gets heard, which does not happen. But let's say I'm super generous and say that that's still 35 million songs and 35 million different artists. Let's just say each artist has a different song, which does not get heard at all. Which does not get heard at all. You know what I mean? They get significantly less airplay, playtime, or no airplay and playtime. So when I heard that, I immediately thought of publishing because obviously I'm an author, I'm a writer, so I kind of brought it back into my world, and I thought about what gatekeeping looks like today as compared to what it looked like before. And I asked the question kind of half jokingly, but seriously at the same time, to say, were authors better off previously, where publishers, especially large publishers, were the gatekeepers? That was your barrier to entry. You had to go through a publisher if you wanted your work to be published. And even taking it further back, if it wasn't a traditional publisher, meaning you weren't publishing a novel, you went through some kind of magazine, or even like the Penny Dreadfuls from back in the day, back in the 1800s and stuff like that. There were always gatekeepers. There was always somebody or some institutions at the top that said yes or no, and they would determine whether or not you became published. Now, today that does not exist. Technology has completely removed barriers to publishing. It hasn't even diminished it, it has removed it. You can go to Amazon, click a button, plus press upload, and your book will be uploaded, published, technically, right? Again, zero barriers. But I'm not even asking if that is necessarily, if that's a good or bad thing. What I'm saying is, has gatekeeping actually even gone away? That is a true question I want to talk about today. Has gatekeeping even left? Because in my opinion, gatekeeping has not left at all. This has just transformed itself, and I'm going to tell you why I think that. Um, but first, let's talk about access, because that's what gatekeeping is about, right? Gatekeeping is about access. It's about um, now millions of different authors being able to publish their books, or at least millions of different stories being published every year. I believe there are about 4 million books published globally every year. About half of those books are self-published. So there's a healthy number of new titles coming into the world every year, and that would not have been possible before. Like, the world we live in now, again, makes it very easy for authors to publish. Um, so the access is, that's simple. And I'm not going to argue whether or not, generally speaking, access is a good or is a bad thing. I know a whole part of access is good, especially me. I'm a black author. I'd be negligent if I did not acknowledge the fact that I think there's a study that I put into my article on Writers Are Superstars that said from 1950 till I think 2020, 97% or 95% of the authors who were published were white. You know, like, it was an insane number. And I think it was a McGill University study that said that. But it's an insane number. So I know that's much different today, the makeup of the world, and especially North America, where I'm from, Canada very specifically. But it's just different today, right? So that there is some improvement. I know through my own kind of research that the the publishing industry, although it's still about 70% non-diverse, let's just say that there have been some kind of strides taken to improve diversity and stuff like that, starting with diversity within the publishing industry itself, meaning like the editors and the publishers, the people who run publishing and stuff like that, the executives. There have been some change in that, but at the same time, again, like it's still very far from being completely diverse. So I do want to recognize that part of the access, right? But the other part of access means that everybody could be an author these days. Everybody. You know what I'm saying? So my books, and I say my books because, and I'm pointing to myself as representative of someone who wants to be an author, or is an author, I should say, for their life and their career. Like, this is what I want to do. I write books. You know, this is my career. Just like there are doctors, just like there are athletes or whatever, broadcasters. Like, this is my career. This is something I take seriously. I work at, I practice at every single minute of every day. Like, I love this, right? But the barriers to access gone, I'm at the same, you're going to see me in the same place as you would Kirby from across the street, who is a mechanic, but wants to try his hand at being an author. Some authors have a big problem with that we're actually on the same platform and on the same level, because there are zero barriers to entry. So there's that I also just want to acknowledge really quickly. um, the other part I want to talk about this, and again, my point, what I'm getting to is, has gatekeeping ever left? Is a point I'm going to try to make today. So the other part of this is I want to get to is media. The media has been solely responsible for making or breaking authors, right? Historically, they have been responsible for making or breaking authors, because publishers do not sell books themselves. They distribute books, they create books, yes, produce books, but they don't sell books. They depend on third parties to sell books. So they depend on newspapers, magazines, other media outlets to really promote and sell the book. That's how publishing works. So when those media conglomerates were strong, right, then they became another form of gatekeepers, right? Because they determined whether or not they liked these books, and whether or not they would promote these books and these authors to the public based on the, again, the opinions of a few, you know? So it's odd, though, or it's interesting, I should say, that now media has been disrupted. So now the media platforms that were so prominent before in promoting these books and saying which authors are going to be the next, insert your favorite popular author's name right here. But that's no longer the case. Like, media is so fractured now that it has become a lot of independent media people on Substack, for example, on YouTube, another example, and on TikTok, which we're going to get into in a second, that have really um, played a huge role in helping authors get the word out about their novels or books, or just talking about books and promoting books in general. So it's a much more fractured landscape now, right? So it's not the same as having a single or a few media conglomerates really running the show. That's not what it is anymore. But here's the thing: when publishers, so big publishers, or publishers in general, were the gatekeepers, and when media, the big media conglomerates, were the gatekeepers, the access felt nearly impossible, right? You had to be like you had a 1 in a million chance, probably one in a much more than that chance of actually being published, and then an even smaller chance of actually being successful to where you could actually make writing your career, right? Because they had the standard, they set the rules, you weren't able to use technology to publish. Now that's not the case anymore, apparently, like, at least not for the publishers and the media, because of what I just mentioned. Now we have another platform, TikTok, that has kind of stepped in as one of those spaces that is supposed to be much more organic, and is supposed to be the democratized version of what what the previous gatekeepers were. They're supposed to be the organic version of what the previous gatekeepers were. And maybe TikTok and Book Talk specifically did start out like that. Maybe it did start out as, and I would say it did start out as being super organic, where book lovers just picked up a book and said, "Oh my gosh, I love this book," shared it, um, and all of a sudden now somebody else would read it, and you know how that went, right? Like we know the authors who blew up off of TikTok and whatnot. But my question is this: getting back to the point I'm trying to make, I'm trying to say, has gatekeeping ever left? What is the difference between book talk and the media, the previous traditional media? Can me as an author send an email or send a DM to a super popular TikToker and get a response? That's going to be tough. The TikTokers come with their own biases, right? They come with their own biases. Go to a bookstore and look at the TikTok shelf, right? Because all bookstores now have this TikTok shelf. Go to the bookstore, look at the TikTok shelf, and you're going to see a lot of the same books in there because TikTokers, they're regular people and they come with their own biases. But when you group it together and call on a singular platform and call it book talk, now those biases resemble a lot of what the previous media represented and what their biases represented. So to me, this new world of that's supposed to be so accessible and so democratic, they have a lot of the similarities and the same characteristics as previous media and previous publishers. So the question again stands, has gatekeeping really left? How many self-published authors has TikTok blown up? How many? How many authors who were fully self-published before they got onto TikTok? TikTok found them, and TikTok elevated them to the level of, I'm not even gonna say like a Colleen Hoover, like that's whatever, but like elevated them to a level where they're recognizable and they can make a living. Like how many self-published authors has Book Talk done that for? You know what I'm saying? It's still at the end of the day media. It's still at the end of the day art, which means it's still at the end of the day subjective. And when you're dealing in subjectivity, I feel like you're always going to have a little bit of bias or a lot of bias. And when you have bias, it manifests itself, especially when you group it onto a platform, it manifests itself as gatekeeping. So I'll ask this question again. Have gatekeepers or has gatekeeping ever left? Because I just see a different form of gatekeeping happening right now. A total different form, but at the same time, it's still gatekeeping. I don't see much difference. I think it's still, again, I'm going to acknowledge the fact that the access has made it possible for more authors, especially authors who look like me, to get into the game, for sure. But if you know anything about book publishing a book is literally step one out of 100 that you have to take to become successful. And when I say successful, I just mean just like being able to sustain a career, make enough money to sustain a career and sustain yourself and live your lifestyle. So I'm not talking about rich, I'm talking about just earning enough money to sustain a lifestyle and to pay bills and live life. It takes a lot more than that. A lot more than that. And the gatekeepers today still withhold access to certain authors. Still. And it might not be as specific to race, and some people argue it is, but I'm not making that argument today. The gatekeeping might not be specific to race or ethnicity or culture, but it is still very subject to biases. And those biases are clear, like the types of book that the people who dominate the platform will actually read. Do you see what's happening? Right? So I'm curious to know what you think. What do you think about this whole gatekeeping situation? Do you think that gatekeeping has changed today? Do you think the access makes it okay today? Do you think because of the access that we're like in the clear, we don't have to worry about gatekeeping because there are no gatekeepers anymore and anyone's able to write a book? I don't know. That's a tough one. In my kind of final wrap up is that this is art, and in art, not everybody wins. It's just not possible. It's a subjective thing. But I want to know what you think. Tell me in the comments. And yeah, let's have a real conversation about this.